John Cremony was born in 1815 in Boston, Massachusetts, and he claimed to be of Cuban descent. When he was a young man, he ran away to sea, where he witnessed piracy and slave trading. When the Mexican-American War broke out in 1846, John enlisted in the Massachusetts Volunteers, where he served as a Spanish-language interpreter. After the war, he found work as a newspaperman and later as an interpreter for the U.S. Boundary Commission. He would eventually head to California to seek gold as a miner and prospector. At the outbreak of the Civil War, John joined the California Volunteers as a captain in Company B, 2nd Regiment California Volunteer Cavalry. They marched to New Mexico Territory as part of the California Column. John Cremony served most of his military career in the Southwest, and he personally knew Apache chiefs Mangus Coloradus and Cochise. He was the first white man to become fluent in Apache and wrote the first dictionary on the Apache language. This being the case, he was often able to resolve issues between the military and Apache, and in 1868 he wrote the book Life Among the Apaches. But his relations with the Apaches were not always peaceful. The following is John Cremony's first-hand account of a brutal fight between soldiers and a band of hostile Apaches. No one expected an attack in so open, exposed, and unsheltered a place. Yet it was the very one selected for such a purpose. The wily savages knew that we would be upon our guard in passing a defile, a thick wood, or a rocky canyon, and also judged that we might be careless while crossing an open plain. They were well acquainted with the dusty character of the road, and relying on it to conceal their presence, had secreted themselves close to its southern edge, awaiting our approach. At a certain spot where a dozen or two yucca trees elevated their sharp-pointed leaves about 4 feet above the ground, and while we were shrouded in a cloud of dust, a sharp, rattling volley was poured into us from a distance of less than 20 yards. It has always been a matter of astonishment to me that none of our party were either killed or wounded, but we lost 2 mules and 3 horses by that fire. The dense dust prevented the Apaches from taking aim, and they fired a little too low. It was no time for hesitation, and the order was at once given to dismount and fight on foot. We could distinguish little or nothing. Shot after shot was expended in the direction of the savages. Now and then a dark body would be seen and made a target of as soon as seen. Each man threw himself flat upon the ground, but scarcely anyone could tell where his companions were. It was preeminently a fight in which each man was on his own hook. While we laid prostrate, the dust settled somewhat, and we were about to obtain a good sight of the enemy, when John Wollaston cried out, "Up, boys, they are making a rush." Each man rose at the word, and a hand-to-hand contest ensued, which beggars all description. It was at this juncture that our revolvers did the work, as was afterwards shown. Again the dust rose in blinding clouds, hurried up by the tramping feet of contending men. We stood as much chance to be shot by each other as by the savages. The quick rattling of pistols was heard on all sides, but the actors in this work of death were invisible. The last charge of my second pistol had been exhausted, my large knife lost in the thick dust on the road, and the only weapon left me was a small double-edged but sharp and keen dagger with a black whalebone hilt and about 4 inches long on the blade. I was just reloading a 6-shooter when a robust and athletic Apache, much heavier than myself, stood before me, not more than 3 feet off. He was naked, with the single exception of a breechcloth, and his person was oiled from head to foot. I was clothed in a green hunting frock edged with black, a pair of green pants trimmed with black welts, and a green broad-brimmed felt hat. The instant we met, he advanced upon me with a long and keen knife, with which he made a plunge at my breast. This attack was met by stopping his right wrist with my left hand, and at the same moment I lunged my small dagger full at his abdomen. He caught my right wrist in his left hand, and for a couple of seconds, a long time under such circumstances, we stood regarding each other, my left hand holding his right above my head, and his left retaining my right on a level with his body. Feeling that he was greased, and that I had no certain hold, I tripped him with a sudden and violent pass of the right foot, which brought him to the ground, but in falling, he seized and carried me down with him. In a moment, the desperate savage gained the ascendant, and planted himself firmly on my person, with his right knee on my left arm, confining it closely, and his left arm pinioning my right to the ground, while his right arm was free. I was completely at his mercy. His personal strength and weight were greater than mine. His triumph and delight glared from his glittering black eyes, and he resolved to lose nothing of his savage enjoyment. holding me down with the grasp of a giant, against which all my struggles were wholly vain. He raised aloft his sharp knife and said, Pin da liko yi da se go di na tat san, which means, the wide-eyed man, you will be soon dead. I thought as he did, and in that frightful moment made a hasty commendation of my soul to the benevolent. But I am afraid that it was mingled with some scheme to get out of my predicament, if possible. To express the sensations I underwent at that moment is not within the province of language. My erratic and useless life passed in review before me, in less than an instant of time. I lived more in that minute or two of our deadly struggle than I had ever done in years, and as I was wholly powerless, I gave myself up for lost, another victim to Apache ferocity. His bloodshot eyes gleamed upon me with intense delight, and he seemed to delay the death stroke for the purpose of gladdening his heart upon my fears and inexpressible torture. All this transpired in less than half a minute, but to me it seemed hours. Suddenly he raised his right arm for the final stroke. I saw the descending blow of the deadly weapon, and knew the force with which it was driven. The love of life is a strong feeling at any time, but to be killed like a pig by an Apache seemed preeminently dreadful and contumelious. Down came the murderous knife, aimed full at my throat, for his position on my body made that the most prominent part of attack. Instantly I twisted my head and neck one side to avoid the blow and prolong life as much as possible. The keen blade passed in dangerous proximity to my throat, and buried itself deeply in the soft soil, penetrating my black silk cravat, while his right thumb came within reach of my mouth, and was as quickly seized between my teeth. His struggles to free himself were fearful, but my life depended on holding fast. Finding his efforts vain, he released his grasp of my right arm and seized his knife with his left hand. But the change, effected under extreme pain, reversed the whole state of affairs. Before my antagonist could extricate his deeply buried weapon with his left hand, and while his right was held fast between my teeth, I circled his body and plunged my sharp and faithful dagger twice between his ribs, just under his left arm, at the same time making another convulsive effort to throw off his weight. In this I succeeded, and in a few moments had the satisfaction of seeing my enemy gasping his last under my repeated thrusts. Language would fail to convey anything like my sensations during that deadly contest, and I will not attempt the task.